They say power builds walls, and Leonard Crane had built his life with bricks of isolation. Trust only in numbers, and loyalty purchased by paychecks. As the founder of a billion-dollar tech firm, Leonard was used to people following his rules, not crossing them. So when he walked into his private home office one quiet Sunday morning and saw Rosa, his live-in maid, typing on his work computer without permission, everything inside him exploded. To him, it wasn't just a breach of rules, it was betrayal. Or so he thought. Leonard Crane lived in a sleek modern mansion perched atop the quiet hills of Marin County, California. A panoramic view of the bay glittered from his floor to ceiling. Windows and every inch of his house had been designed to reflect the pristine control he exerted over his life. He didn't like surprises, didn't like mess, and certainly didn't like people crossing boundaries. That's why he had strict rules for his household staff, especially when it came to his home office. The office was his sanctuary, a silent, sterile space of logic, innovation, and high-level confidential projects. No one was allowed in. Not even Rosa. Rosa had worked for him for nearly 2 years. A quiet, polite woman in her mid-20s with kind eyes and worn-out shoes. She barely spoke unless spoken to. She cleaned the kitchen before sunrise, made sure the laundry was folded military neat, and always disappeared into the background. Leonard hardly noticed her. Until today. He had returned early from a weekend retreat in Lake Tahoe. He never told the staff his schedule. He liked unpredictability. It kept everyone on edge. As he pushed open the heavy oak door of his office, expecting to find it untouched, he froze. The soft clack-clack-clack of keys echoed across the marble floor. His heart dropped. There she was, Rosa, sitting in his chair. On his computer, Leonard's jaw tightened. He didn't shout. He didn't speak. He simply stepped forward, his shadow stretching across the floor until Rosa noticed and turned around with wide, panicked eyes. I'm sorry, Mr. Crane, she stammered, immediately rising to her feet. His voice was ice. What are you doing? Her fingers trembled. I didn't mean to intrude. You were just using my work computer. Without permission? He snapped, his hands clenched into fists. This is a violation of your contract. You know no one is allowed in here. She swallowed hard. Please just let me explain, but he cut her off. Get out, now, you're fired. The words echoed in the room like a slap. Rosa's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't beg. She nodded silently, head bowed, and walked out. Leonard remained standing, his breath tight in his chest, fury swirling in his mind like a storm. He marched toward the desk, intending to shut the computer down and erase whatever she had touched. He hated the idea of someone, especially a maid, browsing through his work. What if she had accessed confidential files? What if she'd tried to steal information? But as he moved the mouse and the screen blinked on, what he saw made his breath catch. It wasn't spreadsheets. It wasn't emails. It wasn't anything to do with him. It was a Word document. The title read, "For My Brother, A Better Future." Leonard blinked. His finger hovered over the mouse. He scrolled down and began to read. I know you're still too young to understand all of this, Mateo. But one day, I hope you'll read these words and know that your sister tried her best. That I scrubbed floors, washed dishes, and cleaned toilets, not because I was worthless, but because I wanted you to have a chance to be more than I ever could. The words struck like a blade. He scrolled further. Mr. Crane is strict, cold. I don't think he even knows my name. But every night, after finishing my work, I've been sneaking into his office, not to steal, but to use his computer to finish the book I promised Mama I'd write. For you, so you'd know our story. So you'd never forget who we were, even if I never get the chance to return home. Leonard's hand trembled on the mouse. What was this? A book? About her life? He couldn't stop reading. The paragraphs unfolded like petals, raw, painful, beautiful. Rosa wrote about growing up in El Salvador, about a mother who died too young, about escaping poverty, violence, and making the dangerous journey north so she could earn money to send home to her 10-year-old brother. She wrote about working for cold, rich people who never saw her as a person. She wrote about missing her brother's birthday every year. And she wrote about hope that one day he would be proud of her. Leonard sat down stunned. He read until the end of the document. It wasn't complete, maybe halfway done, but it was enough. He leaned back in his chair. His chest felt heavy. He realized something. Rosa hadn't violated his trust. She had trusted him with her dreams, with her story, and he had almost crushed her without a second thought. He remembered the way she hadn't argued, hadn't begged, as if she expected no kindness from men like him. He stood up abruptly. Leonard paced the hallway with an urgency he hadn't felt in years. The pages of Rosa's story still echoed in his mind. Each line was a quiet scream, a scream no one had heard until now. He found her in the kitchen, packing her small tote bag with trembling hands. She looked up when she heard his footsteps but didn't speak. Her eyes were red, her face blank, resigned. "I told you to leave," he said, his voice firmer than he meant. Rosa froze. She lowered her head again. "Yes, sir. I'm sorry. I understand. I didn't mean to break your trust. I read it," he interrupted. She looked up slowly. Her lips parted, but no words came. "I read what you wrote about your brother, about El Salvador, about May." Rosa's face turned pale. Her shoulders tensed like someone bracing for a blow. Leonard let out a breath. "Why didn't you just ask me for a computer?" She laughed bitterly, not from humor, but from pain. "People like me don't ask men like you for anything." That sentence hit him harder than her being in his office. He looked at her. Really looked at her. How many mornings had she swept the floors beneath his feet? How many times had she scrubbed the corners of this mansion without ever making a sound, while he sat behind glass walls, believing silence meant loyalty? He folded his arms. "How long have you been writing that?" "Over a year, only when no one was around. Only when I thought I had time." "And your brother?" "In El Salvador. He's 10. I send money every month, for food, for school. He loves to read. I promised him I'd write our story so he'd always remember where we came from." Leonard leaned against the counter. His voice softened. "It's not just a story." She said nothing. "It's literature," he added. "It's beautiful." "Now." Rosa looked confused. Her brows pulled together, unsure if this was mockery or madness. "You're a maid," he said, "but you write like a published author. That doesn't make sense." She smiled, but her eyes glistened. "I used to be a literature student, back home. Before the cartels came for my cousin. Before I had to flee." A silence settled between them. And for the first time in 2 years, Rosa's presence filled the room, not as background but as a person, a human being, a sister, a writer, a survivor. Leonard felt something shift inside him. The man who built empires had no words for this kind of reckoning. He walked to the fridge, grabbed 2 bottles of water, and handed her one. She took it carefully, confused. "I fired you," he said quietly, "because I thought you were invading my privacy." She nodded. "But you were just trying to hold on to your past." Rosa whispered, "No, I was trying to build a future." That one sentence undid him. He sat down heavily at the kitchen island. "What happens now?" "You leave." "And then what?" "I find another job. If I can, maybe I clean offices at night, or wash dishes in a diner. I keep going, like always." Leonard stared at the marble countertop. His life was built on formulas, code, risk calculations. But none of his spreadsheets had ever accounted for the kind of quiet strength Rosa carried in her eyes. "I want to help you finish your book," he said suddenly. She blinked. "You don't owe me anything," she replied. "I know," he said. "That's why I mean it." She shook her head, still uncertain. Leonard stood again. He walked toward the door, but turned back. "I'm not just saying this because I feel guilty. I'm saying it because you've reminded me of something I forgot a long time ago. That people matter, their stories matter." A long pause. Then Rosa spoke with a shaky voice. "What do you want from me?" He smiled just slightly. "Just trust. And maybe a little time in my office while I'm not using it." She didn't cry. Not yet. But something in her shoulders softened. The armor dropped. The next few weeks changed both of them. Leonard cleared out a section of his office, set up a writing space just for Rosa. He even installed a fingerprint login just for her, something he never allowed anyone else to have. When his colleagues asked what the new writing station was for, he simply said, "A project more important than anything we've launched this year." Every evening after finishing her chores, Rosa would sit quietly in the office and type. Leonard often watched from the hallway, not intruding, just learning the sound of her thoughts, the rhythm of someone who had learned to survive in silence. They didn't talk much at first, but one night, Leonard knocked on the frame and asked gently, "Can I read today's pages?" Rosa handed them to him with shy pride. He sat in his leather chair and read for nearly an hour. When he finished, he looked at her and said, "We're going to publish this." She laughed, unsure if he was joking. "I mean it," he said. "I know editors. Real ones. I'll help. It deserves to be out there." "But I'm just a maid," she whispered. "No," he said. "You're a storyteller. And the world needs more of those." The manuscript took shape like a growing heartbeat, slow, steady, undeniable. Rosa poured herself into the pages each night, her fingers dancing across the keyboard like someone writing her way out of a dark tunnel. Her words were not just memories. They were mirrors of loss, of love, of the quiet kind of resilience that most people never saw. Leonard read every chapter, not as a boss, not even as a friend, but as a man who had finally found something pure in a world of transactions. One evening, as the rain whispered softly against the glass walls of the office, Rosa handed him another chapter. Her eyes were tired, her blouse still damp from wiping down the kitchen floors earlier, but her spirit, it glowed with something he hadn't seen before. Purpose. Leonard read in silence. Then suddenly he stopped. "Sometimes I imagine my mother still here, telling me I did enough. That working in a rich man's house doesn't make me small. That Matteo won't be ashamed of me. That someone somewhere will see me, really see me, and not just walk past like I'm invisible." The sentence pulled tears into his eyes before he could stop them. Rosa noticed. "Is everything okay?" she asked quietly. He nodded, wiping his cheek. "I'm sorry, that part, it just hit me." She gave him a small smile. "It hits me too. Every time I type it." For a long time, neither of them spoke. The sound of the rain was enough. Then Leonard said something that surprised even him. "My mother used to tell me the same thing. That being rich wouldn't matter if no one truly knew who I was." Rosa looked at him differently then. For the first time, she didn't see a billionaire boss in an expensive sweater. She saw the boy behind the empire. The son who had lost a mother too. What happened to her? She asked softly. "She died when I was 17, he said. "Breast cancer." She didn't tell anyone until it was too late. She didn't want to burden me. "I'm sorry," Rosa said. And she meant it. "She used to write poetry," Leonard added. "I still have her notebook somewhere, but I haven't read it in years." Rosa nodded. "Maybe you should." That night, Leonard went up to the attic and found the box he hadn't opened in over a decade. His mother's poetry was still there, wrapped in old lace and fading paper. He sat on the floor, knees to his chest, and cried as he read. And when he came back downstairs, he knew exactly what he had to do. He called his old college friend Naomi, now a senior acquisitions editor for a major publishing house. When she answered, her tone was sharp and skeptical. "Leonard? You're calling me about a manuscript?" "Yes. You don't read fiction." "This isn't fiction." She hesitated. "Who's the author?" He smiled. "A Maid. But she writes like Maya Angelou reborn." Naomi laughed. "Come on." "I'm serious. I'll send it tonight. If you read it and don't cry, I'll never call you again." That got her attention. He sent the first 5 chapters by midnight. She had read them all by dawn. She called back with a voice raw from tears. "She's brilliant," Naomi said. "You were right. This isn't just a story, it's a movement." Rosa couldn't believe it. When Leonard told her about the publishing interest, she stared at him like he was speaking another language. "They want to publish me?" she asked, her voice shaking. Double quotes, "Yes. And they're willing to pay you in advance. Enough to send Matteo to school for the next 10 years. Rosa burst into tears. But this time, they weren't silent tears tucked behind a smile. They were full, messy sobs of joy, of disbelief, of release. Leonard stepped forward and did something he'd never done before. He hugged her, and for a moment, the two people from opposite worlds stood in the middle of a kitchen, not as employer and employee, but as humans connected by pain, hope, and the power of a single story. The publishing process was grueling. Edits, legal forms, interviews. Rosa navigated it all with quiet humility. Leonard hired a publicist, a lawyer, even a stylist for her first TV appearance. But Rosa never let it get to her head. She still cleaned the house, still woke early to cook rice and eggs for herself. Fame didn't interest her. Freedom did, and when the book was finally released titled Ashes and Mango Trees, a nod to her childhood in San Vicente, it became a quiet phenomenon. Not viral, not explosive, but powerful. Readers around the world sent letters. Women who had cleaned homes, men who had lost siblings, young immigrants who saw themselves in her every sentence. Her inbox flooded with messages like, "Your words gave me back my voice. I never saw my mother cry, but after reading your story, I finally understood why she was so tired all the time. Thank you. Just thank you." One day, Rosa sat down beside Leonard in the garden. The sun was setting, orange and warm. "I want to quit," she said. Leonard turned. "Quit what?" "Cleaning this house. I want to use the money to start something." He looked surprised. "Start what?" "A foundation. For girls who want to write, girls like me, who have no voice, no laptop. Just stories inside them, waiting." Leonard smiled, slowly. "I'll help you build it." She shook her head. "Not as a sponsor. As a partner." And for once, Leonard didn't see himself as the savior. He saw himself being saved from a life of sterile ambition, disconnected power, and loneliness wrapped in success. The launch of the Rosa Foundation for Voices Unheard was quiet but intentional. Held in a modest community center in the Mission District, the event was not filled with celebrities or camera crews. Instead, it was packed with women who looked like Rosa, used to maids, cooks, single mothers, and immigrants who had tucked away stories behind exhaustion and silence for too long. Rosa stood on stage in a simple white blouse and navy skirt. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the microphone, but her voice didn't shake. "I was once told that people like me don't get to ask for anything," she began. "But now I know we have the right to speak, and the world needs to listen." The applause was thunderous. But as she scanned the crowd, she looked past the praise. She was searching for someone. In the very back of the room stood a boy, small, nervous, dark-eyed. Matteo. She hadn't seen him in nearly 5 years. Their reunion was made possible by Leonard, who quietly funded the legal process to bring Matteo safely to the U.S., reuniting a family the world tried to separate. Rosa stepped off the stage with tears already brimming in her eyes. Matteo ran into her arms burying his face in her shoulder, and for the first time in years, the ache in her chest eased. "You kept your promise," he whispered. She kissed the top of his head. "Always." Leonard watched from a distance, arms folded, heart swelling with something he hadn't felt in decades. Pride. Not in himself, but in someone else. For the first time in his life, he wasn't the star of the room. And he didn't want to be. He just wanted to stand in the background and witness something real. In the months that followed, Rosa and Matteo moved into a small apartment near the foundation's headquarters. Leonard had offered them a home in his guest wing, but Rosa gently declined. "We need our own place," she'd said. "Not because we don't appreciate you, but because we need to build our roots with our own hands." Leonard understood. For once, generosity wasn't about control. It was about letting someone rise on their own terms. But he remained close, closer than either of them had expected. He helped Rosa secure new laptops for the girls in her writing program. He reviewed funding proposals. He sat in on story workshops and cried quietly as a young girl read aloud a poem about her father's deportation. The house he once called silent was now often filled with Matteo's laughter on weekends, or the scent of Rosa's arroz con leche. Warming on the stove, he didn't ask for these moments, but they came like wild birds, perching softly on the edges of his once lonely world. Then came a moment he didn't expect. One evening, as the three of them sat watching the sun disappear behind the bay, Matteo turned to Rosa and asked, "Is Mr. Crane like our family now?" Rosa glanced at Leonard, then at the boy. "What do you think?" Matteo nodded. "I think he is." Leonard swallowed hard. He didn't speak, but his heart answered in ways his lips couldn't. But peace doesn't always arrive without resistance. One day, Rosa received a call from a powerful journalist. Her book had gained momentum, enough to threaten certain voices that preferred immigrant women, stayed quiet and invisible. "You've been accused of fabricating parts of your story," the journalist said coldly. "There are people who think your background was exaggerated for sympathy." Rosa sat down, stunned. "Everything I wrote is true." The journalist replied, "Truth doesn't matter as much as perception, especially for people like you." She hung up without finishing the call. Her fingers trembled. That night, Leonard found her staring at the blank page in her computer. "They want to take it all away," she said. He sat beside her. "They can't. They can. They're powerful. So are you." She looked at him, the fire returning to her eyes. "You think so?" "I know so," he said. "You didn't write to be famous. You wrote to be heard. And those who matter heard you. That can't be undone." The next morning, Rosa posted a video on social media, unpolished, unedited, honest. She held her brother's hand in hers and spoke directly into the camera. "They want me to prove my pain, as if I owe them my scars. But I wrote not to be believed. I wrote to remember, to heal. And if you see yourself in my story, you already know it's true." The video went viral overnight. The same media that once tried to diminish her now praised her courage. Readers defended her, sharing their own stories. The wave of support was undeniable, but Rosa didn't bask in it. She returned quietly to her foundation, to the girls who still wrote their stories on lined paper with borrowed pens. She told them, "Fame is noise, but truth is a flame. Protect it." It was Matteo who first asked the question that neither Rosa nor Leonard had ever dared to voice. "Why don't you marry him?" He asked her one evening as she braided his hair. Rosa laughed. "Because that's not how life works, Matteo." "Why not?" "He makes you smile. You make him human." She looked out the window. The thought wasn't new, but it scared her. She had never wanted to be rescued. But Leonard hadn't rescued her. He had listened. He had waited. He had grown. Leonard, too, sat alone in his office that night, staring at the same desk where Rosa had once been caught. That moment, what began in anger had opened a door in him. Not just to another person, but to the man he'd forgotten he could be. He opened his drawer and took out his mother's poetry notebook. He turned to the first page. One day, you'll meet someone who reminds you of what's real. Don't push them away. He closed the notebook and stood up. 6 months later, the second edition of Rosa's book was launched, this time with a foreword written by Leonard himself. In it, he wrote, "She came into my life quietly, cleaning, folding, unnoticed. But she taught me that sometimes the greatest stories are hidden in the hands of the people we ignore. And if we listen closely, we'll find that the ones we think we're helping are often the ones saving us." The book became a classic, but Rosa never chased fame again. She chased light, community, purpose. Leonard sold his company, started mentoring youth programs. He didn't need boardrooms anymore. He needed meaning. And one spring afternoon, in a small garden behind the Rosa Foundation, he knelt down with Matteo beside him and asked, "May I be part of your family officially?" Rosa smiled through tears. "You always were." And for the first time in a long time, both of them knew this wasn't the end of a story. It was just the beginning.